Okay, thank you for joining me for Chapter 3, Part 2. In this section of Chapter 3, some important things that I want you to pay attention to, and this goes from page 44 to page 53. So, one thing is I want you to think about what is your opinion of what happened to Candy's dog? The second thing to pay attention to is how do you think this event may be significant later on in the story? So, I want you to make some predictions. And then the third thing is pay attention to any repeated words, ideas, or objects. Okay, let's pick up at the top of page 44. Got a bad gut ache, said Candy. Them gosh darn turnips give it to me. I knowed they was going to before I'd ever eat 'em. The thick-bodied Carlson came in out of the darkening yard. He walked to the other end of the bunkhouse and turned on the second shaded light. Darker'n hell in here, he said. Gosh, how can Crooks pitch shoes? He's plenty good, said Slim. Darn right he is, said Carlson. He don't give nobody else a chance to win. He stopped and sniffed the air, and still sniffing, looked down at the old dog. Gosh almighty, that dog stinks. Get him out of here, Candy. I don't know nothing that stinks as bad as an old dog. You gotta get him out. Candy rolled to the edge of his bunk. He reached over and patted the ancient dog, and he apologized. I've been around him so much, I never notice how he stinks. Well, I can't stand him in here, said Carlson. That stink hangs around even after he's gone. He walked over with his heavy legged stride and looked down at the dog. Got no teeth, he said. He's all stiff with rheumatism. He ain't no good to you, Candy, and he ain't no good to himself. Why don't you shoot him, Candy? The old man squirmed uncomfortably. Well, hell, I had him so long. Had him since he was a pup. I herded sheep with him, he said proudly. You wouldn't think it to look at him now, but he was the best darn sheep dog I ever seen. George said, I seen a guy in Weed that had an Airedale could herd sheep. Learned it from the other dogs. Okay, I'm going to stop right there and going back to the very beginning, those first two paragraphs. Okay, they are referring to with how can crooks pitch shoes. They're talking about playing the game of horseshoes. So that is what that's referring to. And then they're skipping into the dog. Okay, remember before this they had just been playing horseshoes outside, and so that's where we're coming from. Okay, top of page 45. Okay, I want you to also remember when you see an apostrophe in the words, it means that there's a missing letter. So that way it helps you in understanding how to properly read the dialogue. Okay, top of page 45. Carlson was not to be put off. Look, Candy, this old dog just suffers hisself all the time. If you was to take him out and shoot him right in the back of the head, he leaned over and pointed, right there, why, he'd never know what hit him. Candy looked about unhappily. No, he said softly. No, I couldn't do that. I had him too long. He don't have no fun, Carlson insisted. And he stinks to beat hell. Tell you what, I'll shoot him for you. Then it won't be you that does it. Candy threw his legs off his bunk. He scratched the white stubble whiskers on his cheek nervously. I'm so used to him, he said softly. I had him from a pup. Well, you ain't being kind to him keeping him alive, said Carlson. Look, Slim's dog got a litter right now. I bet Slim would give you one of them pups to raise up, wouldn't you, Slim? The Skinner had been studying the old dog with his calm eyes. Yeah, he said. You can have a pup if you want to. He seemed to shake himself free for speech. Carl's right, Candy. That dog ain't no good to himself. I wished somebody'd shoot me if I got old and had it old and a cripple. Candy looked helplessly at him, for Slim's opinions were law. Maybe it hurt him, he suggested. I don't mind taking care of him. Carlson said, the way I'd shoot him, he wouldn't feel nothing. I'd put the gun right there. He pointed with his toe. Right back of the head. He wouldn't even quiver. Candy looked for help from face to face. It was quite dark outside by now. A young laboring man came in. His sloping shoulders were bent forward, and he walked heavily on his heels as though he carried the invisible grain bag. He went to his bunk and put his hat on his shelf. Then he picked a pulp magazine from his shelf and brought it to the light over the table. "Did I show you this, Slim?" he asked. "Show me what?" The young man turned to the back of the magazine, put it down on the table, and pointed with his finger. "Right there. Read that." Slim bent over it. "Go on," said the young man. "Read it out loud." "Dear Editor," Slim read slowly, "I read your mag for 6 years, and I think it is the best on the market. I like stories by Peter Rand. I think he is a wingding. Give us more like the Dark Rider. I don't write many letters. Just thought I would tell you I think your mag is the best dime's worth I ever spent." So, what does that tell you about the magazine? One, look at the references. Okay, we have a reference to an author, Peter Rand, and a story called Dark Rider. And it also tells us the cost of the magazine. So, look back, what is the cost of that magazine? I wish a magazine cost a dime right now. Okay. Slim looked up questioningly. "What do you want me to read that for?" Wit said, "Go on. Read the name at the bottom." Slim read, "Yours for success, William Tenner." He glanced up at Wit again. "What you want me to read that for?" Wit closed the magazine impressively. "Don't you remember Bill Tenner? Worked here about 3 months ago." Slim thought. "Little guy?" he asked. "Drove a cultivator." "That's him!" Wit cried. "That's the guy." "You think he's the guy wrote this letter?" "I know it. Bill and me was in here one day. Bill had one of them books that just come. He was looking in it and he says, 'I wrote a letter. I wonder if they put it in the book.' But it wasn't there. Bill says, 'Maybe they're saving it for later.' And that's just what they done. There it is." "Guess you're right," said Slim. "Got it right in the book." George held out his hand for the magazine. "Let's look at it." Wit found the place again, but he did not surrender his hold on it. He pointed out the letter with his forefinger, and then he went to his box shelf and laid the magazine carefully in. "I wonder if Bill's seen it," he said. "Bill and me worked in that patch of field peas. Run cultivators, both of us. Bill was a hell of a nice fella." During the conversation, Carlson had refused to be drawn in. He continued to look down at the old dog. Candy watched him uneasily. At last Carlson said, "If you want me to, I'll put the old devil out of his misery right now and get it over with. Ain't nothing left for him. Can't see, can't eat, can't even walk without hurting." Candy said hopefully, "You ain't got no gun." "The hell I ain't. Got a Luger. It won't hurt him none at all." Candy said, "Maybe tomorrow." "Let's wait till tomorrow." "I don't see no reason for it," said Carlson. He went to his book, pulled his bag from his bunk, pulled his bag from underneath it, and took out a Luger pistol. "Let's get it over with," he said. "We can't sleep with him stinking around in here." He put the pistol in his hip pocket. Candy looked a long time at Slim to try to find some reversal, and Slim gave him none. At last Candy said softly and hopelessly, "All right, take him." He did not look down at the dog at all. He lay back on his bunk and crossed his arms behind his head and stared at the ceiling. From his pocket, Carlson took a little leather thong. He stooped over and tied it around the old dog's neck. All the men except Candy watched him. "Come, boy. Come on, boy," he said gently. And he said apologetically to Candy, "He won't even feel it." Candy did not move nor answer him. He twitched the thong. "Come on, boy." The old dog got slowly and stiffly to his feet and followed the gently pulling leash. Slim said, "Carlson." "Yeah, you know what to do." "What do you mean, Slim?" "Take a shovel," said Slim shortly. "Oh, sure, I get you." He led the dog out into the darkness. So, why is Slim making him take the shovel? I mean, they're going to kill the dog. Why is it important that Carlson takes this shovel? And how do you interpret Slim's reaction or decision, however you would like to put that, in this event? Okay, so what are your thoughts about this? And again, how do you think it may be significant later on in the story. Remember, we are looking for repetition as well. Do you see anything repeated, any words, objects, ideas? Okay, we're on 48, starting with George. George followed to the door and shut the door and set the latch gently in its place. Candy lay rigidly on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Slim said loudly, "One of my lead mules got a bad hoof. Got to get some tar on it." His voice trailed off. It was silent outside. Carlson's footsteps died away. The silence came into the room, and the silence lasted. What literary technique is used in these sentences? The silence came into the room, and the silence lasted. Okay, I want you to think about that. Make an annotation there. That's just something good to have pointed out for reference later. George chuckled. "I bet Lenny's right out there in the barn with his pup. He won't want to come in here no more now he's got a pup." Slim said, "Candy, you can have any one of them pups you want." Candy did not answer. The silence fell on the room again. It came out of the night and invaded the room. George said, "Anybody like to play a little Ikra?" I'm sorry, I should have looked that up. "I'll play out a few with you," said Wit. They took places opposite each other at the table under the light, but George did not shuffle the cards. He rippled the edge of the deck nervously, and the little snapping noise drew the eyes of all the men in the room, so that he stopped doing it. The silence fell on the room again. A minute passed, and another minute. Candy lay still, staring at the ceiling. Slim gazed at him for a moment and then looked down at his hands. He subdued one hand with the other and held it down. There came a little gnawing sound from under the floor, and all the men looked down toward it gratefully. Only Candy continued to stare at the ceiling. "Sounds like there was a rat under there," said George. "We ought to get a trap down there." Wit broke out, "What the hell's taking him so long? Lay out some cards, why don't you? We ain't going to get no euchre played this way." George brought the cards together tightly and studied the backs of them. The silence was in the room again. A shot sounded in the distance. The men looked quickly at the old man. Every head turned toward him. For a moment he continued to stare at the ceiling. Then he rolled slowly over and faced the wall and lay silent. George shuffled the cards noisily and dealt them. Wit drew a scoring board to him and set the pegs to start. Wit said, "I guess you guys really come here to work." "What do you mean?" George asked. Wit laughed. "Well, you come on a Friday. You got 2 days to work till Sunday." "I don't see how you figure," said George. Top of page 50. Wit laughed again. "You do if you've been around these big ranches much. Guy that wants to look over a ranch comes in Saturday afternoon. He gets Saturday night supper and 3 meals on Sunday, and he can quit Monday morning after breakfast without turning his hand. But you come to work Friday noon. You got to put in a day and a half, no matter how you figure." George looked at him levelly. "We're going to stick around a while," he said. "Me and Lenny's going to roll up a steak." The door opened quietly, and the stable buck put in his head. A lean head, lined with pain, the eyes patient. "Mr. Slim?" Slim took his eyes from old Candy. "Huh? Oh, hello, Crooks. What's the matter?" "You told me to warm up tar for that mule's foot. I got it warm." "Oh, sure, Crooks. I'll come right out and put it on." "I can do it if you want, Mr. Slim." "No, I'll come do it myself." He stood up. Crooks said, "Mr. Slim?" "Yeah?" "That big new guy's messing around your pups out in the barn." "Well, he ain't doing no harm. I give him one of those pups." "Just thought I'd tell you," said Crooks. "He's taking 'em out of the nest and handling them. That won't do them no good." "He won't hurt 'em," said Slim. "I'll come along with you now." George looked up. "If that crazy guy's fooling around too much, just kick him out, Slim." Slim followed the stable buck out of the room. George dealt and Whit picked up his cards and examined them. Seen the new kid yet?" he asked. "What kid?" George asked. "Why, Curly's new wife." "Yeah, I seen her." "Well, ain't she a Lulu?" "I ain't seen that much of her," said George. Whit laid down his cards impressively. "Well, stick around and keep your eyes open. You'll see plenty. She ain't concealing nothing. I never seen nobody like her. She got the eye going all the time on everybody. I bet she even gives the stable buck the eye. I don't know what the hell she wants." George asked casually, "Been any trouble since she got here?" It was obvious that Whit was not interested in his cards. He laid his hand down and George scooped it in. George laid out his deliberate solitaire hand, 7 cards, and 6 on top, and 5 on top of those. Whit said, "I see what you mean. No, they ain't been nothing yet. Curly's got a yellow jackets in his drawers, but that's all so far. Every time the guys is around, she shows up. She's looking for Curly, or she thought she left something laying around, and she's looking for it. Seems like she can't keep away from the guys. And Curly's pants is just crawling with ants, but they ain't nothing come of it yet." George said, "She's going to make a mess. They's going to be a bad mess about her. She's a jailbait all set on the trigger. That Curly got his work cut out for him. Ranch with a bunch of guys on it ain't no place for a girl, especially like her." Top of page 52. Whit said, "If you got ideas, you ought to come in town with us guys tomorrow night." "Why? What's doing?" "Just the usual thing. We go into old Susie's place. Hell of a nice place. Old Susie's a laugh, always cracking jokes, like she says when we come up on the front porch last Saturday night. Susie opens the door and then she yells over her shoulder, 'Get your coats on, girls. Here comes the sheriff.' She never talks dirty, neither. Got 5 girls there." "What's it set you back?" George asked. "2.5. You can get a shot for 2 bits. Susie got nice chairs to sit in, too. If a guy don't want to flop, why, he can just sit in the chairs and have a couple or 3 shots and pass the time of day, and Susie don't give a darn. She ain't rushing guys through and kicking 'em out if they don't want nothing." "Might go in and look the joint over," said George. "Sure, come along. It's a hell of a lot of fun, her cracking jokes all the time. Like she says one time, she says, 'I've knew people that if they got a rag rug on the floor and a Cupid doll lamp on the phonograph, they think they're running a parlor house.' That's Clara's house she's talking about. And Susie says, 'I know what you boys want. My girls is clean,' she says, 'and there ain't no water in my whiskey,' she says. 'If any of you guys want to look at a Cupid doll lamp and take your own chance getting burned, why, you know where to go.' And she says, 'There's guys around here walking bow-legged 'cause they like to look at a Cupid doll lamp.'" George asked, "Claire runs the other house, huh?" "Yeah," said Whit. "We don't never go there. Clara gets $3 a crack and 35 cents a shot, and she don't crack no jokes. But Susie's place is clean, and she got nice chairs. Don't let no goo-goos in, neither." "Me and Lenny's rolling up a stake," said George. "I might go in and set and have a shot, but I ain't putting out no 2.5. "Well, a guy gotta have some fun sometimes," said Whit. The door opened, and Lenny and Carlson came in together. Lenny crept to his bunk and sat down, trying not to attract attention. Carlson reached under his bunk and brought out his bag. He didn't look at old Candy, who still faced the wall. Carlson found a little cleaning rod in the bag and a can of oil. He laid them on his bed and then brought out the pistol, took out the magazine, and snapped the loaded shell from the chamber. Then he fell to cleaning the barrel with the little rod. When the ejector snapped, Candy turned over and looked for a moment at the gun before he turned back to the wall again. Carlson said casually, "Curly been in yet?" "No," said Whit. "What's eating on Curly?" Carlson squinted down the barrel of his gun. "Looking for his old lady. I seen him going round and round outside." Whit said sarcastically, "He spends half his time looking for her, and the rest of the time she's looking for him." Curly burst into the room excitedly. "Any of you guys seen my wife?" he demanded. "She ain't been here," said Whit. Curly looked threateningly about the room. "Where the hell, Slim?" Okay. And that is it for chapter 3, part 2. So I would again just double check for things that you need to make annotations over and think about these 3 questions that are on the slide. And then you can pick up with chapter 3, part 3.